Run down the Denver Broncos, who won the AFC West last year, and we're going to talk about them next. They were on the doorstep of the Super Bowl after bouncing back in 2025. Bo Nix, their quarterback, led the NFL in game-winning drives. Broncos tied a franchise record with 14 wins, but they didn't have Nix in the AFC Championship game where they lost to the Patriots. The draft wasn't very exciting. They had just one pick in the first 3 rounds, which was the fewest of any team. That, of course, partially because they traded their first-round pick for Jalen Waddle. Jeff Legwold covers the Denver Broncos for us at ESPN. So, Jeff, first of all, what's the latest on Nix and his recovery from that injury?
Well, Dan, they're the only team in the league, I believe, that's going to have all of its off-season workouts in June, all OTAs, minicamp, and he is not expected to participate in the 11-on-11 work in any way. There's been some rumblings he may do limited things, but I do not expect to see him do anything of significance until training camp. Even
without him, they were still within 3 points of the Patriots in that game. They were that close to the Super Bowl, which you must really eat at Sean Payton. So what can you share with us in terms of their plans to get even further this year?
Yeah, well, they obviously liked the team they had. He believed it was a Super Bowl team last year, and what they do in the offseason? Well, they had 21 players who were unrestricted, restricted, or exclusive rights free agents. They re-signed 17 of them. I've never seen anything like it in all my years. Their significant move, trade for Jalen Waddle. They believe that's the one thing offensively they could not punish defenses down the field. They were near the bottom of the league in 3 and outs, 29th in the league in drives that ended in 3 and outs. Very low impact at the tight end position, so they're looking to push the ball down the field some and punish nickel defenses in the middle of the field.
Peter, what more can you share with us on their expectations for Jalen Waddle in Denver?
I'm going to give some flowers to Jeff here because I polled a lot of different NFL GMs and coaches after the draft and said, whose big boards do you guys actually look at as far as trying to rank? It says Jeff Legwold is one of the top ones. We always have that in our hands. And I use that as a segue because they traded that first-round pick and got Jalen Waddle. One of the main reasons why was they were looking at this wide receiver draft class, and they said at the back half of the first round, we don't think Carnell Tate's going to be there. We don't anticipate Jordan Tyson going to be there. Maybe Cooper is going to be there if we're doing it in the late 20s. Maybe he ended up being there. But all 3 of those guys, we'll put Jalen Waddle in that conversation. And if we can exchange that pick for Jalen Waddle, that makes us all the better, and it makes us better now. So I look at their wide receivers room, and it's almost like you got a starting 5 in basketball where you got a speedster like Mims, you got another speedster like Jalen Waddle. Those could be your guards. Then you got the bodies like Sutton and Pat Bryant, and then you go down the list with all the different guys that can all play different roles. That's what they're excited about. And in Jalen Waddle, they have a first-round pick that they feel almost better than if they had drafted one and got one that was right out of college.
Yeah. Clears throat. I mean, after the draft, especially when we see how it all unfolded, that trade for Jalen Waddle has only aged better and better and better and better and better. I mean, first and foremost, Jalen Waddle is ready to have a major impact on this team today. 0 growing pains, 0 development needed, right? Like you can absolutely hit the ground running and rely on him in big moments, aka the playoffs, AFC championship games, etc. So like that, it's just that move has only aged better and better and better. And it's not like they needed to do something extreme, right? It's not like they had to give up 1 million first-round picks or something like that, or they gave their 8th overall pick or something, right? Like none of those types of situations. It's not like they have to pay him like he's obviously getting paid and a healthy amount, but nothing that's like astronomical or where you're like, man, we might only have him for like a year, or like he's right at the cusp of losing his prime right now, like best case scenario we get him for 2 more quality years, and after that like they're not really in that situation. And then what this also does is it also kind of staggers some of the contracts that you'll have, and when the draft is important to really hit, like you'll be able to draft in that time. Whereas now, like let's say you drafted another receiver then, and let's say it ends up being a hit and you're going to pay him the way how some of the contracts when everyone's going to have to get paid like that's when you kind of it's not as staggered in a way where you can kind of pay when you want to pay people, like you're just kind of like, oh, the bills due right now, and a lot of people are asking to get paid like it kind of hurts you in that regard. In this way, you're positioning yourself to take advantage of Bo Nix's rookie contract in a more measurable way without having to back yourself in like a salary cap corner. Which is great. And again, the whole thing is also, if you remember, like the Broncos had been suffering the consequences of the Russell Wilson and the dead cap and all of that, right? And like that is all now, just the real damage is done of that, right? Like it's in the past for the most part, and so it's just the Broncos are in just such an unbelievable situation. I mean, he says, the Sean Payton thought that this was a Super Bowl roster. And everyone laughed at him, and they got to the AFC Championship game and they would have won the AFC Championship game. Okay, they would have won. Isn't it also funny how the Denver Broncos Boone Nix had 7 game-winning drives led the NFL, and yet nobody really emphasized that, or even the 14 wins tying the franchise record. Nobody really emphasized that, and then even had someone like Alex Smith this is the weakest number 1 team in the history of the NFL, and it was like they tied their franchise record. They had 7 game-winning draft the disrespect that this team faced, and be Nix for that matter, but really the team as a whole, not just Bix but the team as a whole, but Bix definitely carried the brunt of the disrespect. I'm actually grateful for it now, because then we get to go into this season with still a lot of that energy and a lot of that doubt, and I just see no reason why the Denver Broncos won't pass with flying colors. I do want to talk a little bit more about his surgically repaired right ankle. We talked about this, I guess last week or so, and I kind of talked about the whole, cleanup surgery and all of that type of stuff, and I had thoughts on it, and some people kind of countered it in the comments section, and someone told me to check out, the Denver podcast, the DMV, or whatever it is, that there was a surgeon there, and he kind of discussed it, and I listened to that, interview about it, and it was actually not as clarifying as people originally tried to make it out to be. And actually, it made me investigate even more. And, clears throat, I'm going to read to you the comment that I wrote, just because I had all my thoughts pretty organized and I put it all down there. So, I'm just going to read that, and then we can unpack it more. But, in essence, the surgeon was like, procedures like this are norm, he on one side he said it's normal for elite athletes. On the other side, he said it was specific because of the injury that he had. And the reason why you're doing it is to monitor potential issues, but try to put it in a package of oh yeah, this is all okay. This is all routine. This all makes sense. But it doesn't it's actually slightly weirder. And that's why I want to talk about I had a lot of people say something here's another person said a surgeon specialist spoke on NYX on DNVR. This was a routine procedure to go in and make sure the cartilage was healing correctly post-surgery to ensure no arthritis occurs at an early age. This is done in 95% of people who get this surgery. This makes it all sound oh see, this is all good blah blah blah. And it's that's not quite what this all means. So this is what the doctor said. Bo is a special patient, right? So he's a VIP. So for these kind of high-level athletes, this is not uncommon to have the cleanup procedure. So what my assumption is that they went inside the ankle joint with a small camera arthroscopic surgery to look at the joint in particular to make sure that the cartilage is still healthy and healing. Okay. Because if the cartilage isn't healing and it's not quite lined up perfectly, you end up with his arthritis, which at his age is super tough to deal with and could potentially impact his career. So, the goal is to make sure that everything's lined up. And any fray edges, loose tissue, they clean that up along the way. And then they ask, so how common is this? If somebody's in Boza's position, is it 50-50 you're going to need cleanup? Is it nearly every time, going to have something you want to tweak? And he says, yeah, I'm going to say nearly every time specifically because he's, a high-profile quarterback. So, it's more so it's a spec, she says, because he's a high NFL quarterback, and it's more so it's the specific injury because it involved the joint and the cartilage. So, not all fractures involve the joint. So, if he had a fracture that didn't involve it, he's unlikely to have the cleanup, but because of the injury and because of the style of it, that's why you then have that type of cleanup. So the doctor's actually saying two completely different things. 1 minute he's saying, oh, it's because he's the VIP. The next minute he's saying it's because of the type of injury because it actually involved other tissue as well. So this was my reply into the comments section. The doctor actually makes the concern clearer, not less. He confirmed this was an intra-articular fracture, meaning the break went through the joint surface and involved cartilage. His entire justification for the cleanup was to prevent arthritis and verify the cartilage healed correctly. That's not reassurance. That's active risk management on an ongoing concern. If it was a clean break outside the joint, there would be no cartilage or joint concern. Therefore, no need for follow-up surgery. So, that's why I'm saying since him being a VIP has nothing to do with anything. Him being a quarterback has nothing to do with anything. And being an NFL has nothing to do with anything because if it was just a straight fracture not involving the joint in any way, you would not have any follow-up. You would not have any follow-up. And if a follow-up is scheduled in that regard, it shows you that there's actually a more severe break. This is what I continue to say, it highlights that this injury was way more severe than it was initially framed and could genuinely cause future issues. Now, to be clear, I do not expect future issues. I'm not super concerned. I'm really not. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about what's happening. It's a fracture that involved a second tissue type that has a fundamentally weaker healing ability and permanent consequences, which is true if it doesn't heal correctly. As the doctor himself said in the interview, that's why the cleanup surgery was planned ahead and why it also proves the injury was more serious than just a fractured ankle. The very need to scope the joint confirms the joint was compromised. You don't need to arthroscope joints that weren't involved. Which then this also kind of coincides with what Sean Payton was discuss. You know what he kind of accidentally revealed. Also notice that he gave two different reasons for why it's nearly every time. Once blaming the injury type, then once blaming the fact that Nick is a high-profile athlete. Those aren't the same thing. VIP medicine means a lower threshold for intervention, not that the procedure was medically necessary. He blended both of them without separating them. The real question that nobody has answered is what did they actually find when they went in? Was it if it was a clean cartilage with mon or fraying, fine. If they found real damage, that's a different story entirely. Until we know what the scope actually revealed, calling it routine/planned is just filling the silence with optimism and is incredibly misleading, which I stand by 100%. So again, I want to emphasize I'm not sounding an alarm and being like, oh my god, Bo Nick is in trouble. His ankle's never going to be the same. Oh no, it's over. Oh, he's going to have problems. This, that, and the third. That's not the case. That's not the case. And now hearing, snorts, what this guy said that he's not going to be participating really in June, that actually is more concerning because the timeline you would expect him to be able to play. Okay. You would expect him to be cleared by June. Not for to be F. You'll on contact pads and all this, but these early practices and type stuff and all that, there's not really a whole ton going on. I mean, it's pretty light. So, the fact that he can't participate 5 months post-initial surgery and then 2 months post the scope that is a legitimate that does tell us something. And then you could kind of guess a little bit that maybe the scope found, more than just a little bit of frayed tissue. Maybe some of the damage, maybe some of the cartilage was still damaged a little bit. So, they kind of had to do some more stuff. The original fracture itself hasn't fully, healed necessarily. That's possible. Or they're being extra conservative and they would be doing that because there is genuine cartilage arthritis risk. Then there's like they're actually legitimately more concerned about the potential for long-term issues than anything else. But like you're talking about getting this surgery and having months and months later and now in June still not being available, for essentially the lightest possible activity. So yeah, again not saying that there's big serious issues. I'm not saying that oh my gosh this is over. I'm not freaking out about it. What I take issue is when we had this conversation before when this was all first announced is really it's the shell game. People are playing the shell game now and it's a lot of sleight of hand and it's a lot look over there and then people are always uncomfortable with these types of conversations and so if you bring up little things like that people get really upset and they challenge like what do you know blah 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 and they just like the temperature raised like this is clearly just a routine procedure nothing to worry about and it's like we're allowed to have conversations we're allowed to discuss this and we're allowed to try to figure out. I heard an interview by another doctor and he said this and it's like I've had surgery done by doctors who have also given those types of interviews nationally. I've been very lucky and very fortunate to work with some, pretty interesting doctors. And it's just like, listen, man, doctors are business people at heart. They seek prestige, money, they want laughter, fame, like not every doctor's like, I just want to help people. And so it's just, anytime you're hearing some of these interviews that are done not by the doctor himself. And if you are hearing the actual doctor who's actually working with the patient himself, like it's always a little tricky. It's always a little tricky. It's always, it's just I said there's a lot of sleight of hand. A lot of sleight handers like, oh, this was completely planned. They always had this planned. They had it planned. It's because they're actively monitoring something. There's active concerns. You don't go in someone's way. I don't care how minor it is arthroscopic. You're still going into them, okay? Like, it's still a legitimate procedure. And then you don't know what they're doing once they're in there. Once they're in there, you don't know exactly what they're doing. And so, again, the fact that they needed that follow-up surgery at the bare minimum shows you the severity of the injury itself, that it went into the joint, cartilage, etc., that they were like, we need to monitor this. That we need to monitor this. If it was just a straightforward fracture, they would not need to do that. They would not go in there. They would just take some x-rays and they'd be like, okay, we see it. We see the callus. We see the bone formation. Perfect. They would not go in there with the scope. It's not how it works. And now the fact that he's not even going to be available in June for like some of the most like basic elementary type stuff like and again it's not like they have to push him to do it but it's just it's just something to discuss. Something to monitor and I believe and this is my opinion now right I'm not telling you that this is 100% validated but because we talk about arthritis and some of these issues especially when you're talking about the body that he's dealing the body part that he's dealing with like I think mostly any of these types of injuries won't 100% affect him like let's say there was actual like long-term concerns and long-term issues for his career itself. Does it hurt his ability to potentially be a great quarterback into his 40s? Right? I got news for you. Majority of quarterbacks are going to struggle to do that, Sure. Right. Also, does it affect his ability to be like to feel good and feel healthy when he's in his 40s and 50s and 60s? Absolutely. Does it really affect his ability to be an elite quarterback when he's 28, 29, 30, 31? No. Does it give him extra inflammation and extra soreness and he's just a little bit extra annoyed throughout the course of his week? For sure. But is it the difference between him having a great career and no career at all? No. It's not the way how I view it personally. Does it increase the likelihood that if he plays Sunday and gets a little banged up and he has to play Thursday that he's just, he's more likely to be 80% rather than the 95% that he could have been? For sure. But it's just like something like this is more annoying that you kind of have to manage and deal around rather than it be like, well, Boone Nix could have reached this high level of a peak, but with this injury now he's down here again. Could it affect the longevity of his career? Sure. But is the difference between him needing to retire at 28 and retiring at 45? No. Like that's not what it does. You know, again, if neithing, the greatest, risk, like I said, if anything, it's just like, yeah, man, when you're 45 and your career is over and you're going for a walk with your wife and kids, like, yeah, you will definitely have a little bit of a reminder that you played football. And when it's like, you know, a little chilly out or it's raining and you feel like the temperature change a little bit and you wake up and you're like, yep, that's my ankle that I feel. You know, you're like, yep, I feel it. And it's just like, yeah, you know, you'll get those reminders. You'll get those feelings and it'll be like, you know, kids jump on you, go, oh, no, that's daddy's bad ankle. Oh, buddy, you got to get off me right now. You're laying on daddy's ankle. You know, like you have those moments. Sure. But it's like it's not the difference between him being able to win a Super Bowl within the next few years or not. And I think that's where people kind of start to get like all anxious and intense, or they just think like, you know, it's just over, chronic, it's done. And it's just like, no, but it is okay to discuss. It is okay to have these conversations. And you know, I don't appreciate when people try to one, silence conversation, or two, be purposely like misleading or do some of the sleight of hand and kind of the look over here. We saw this exact same thing with the Minnesota Vikings and J.J. McCarthy, and it irked me. And as soon as it all unfolded and listened there's a lot of guesswork. Even the doctor who was on that on the podcast or whatever was guessing. He doesn't really know, and that's actually my biggest issue with those doctors, because they're absolutely guessing and they know it's inappropriate to guess. They know it. They absolutely know that it's inappropriate, and if that's your actual your actual profession, it would be so hard. My automatic would be like, he's not my patient. I don't really know what they're monitoring. I don't really know what the concern is or what they're looking to do here. So it's just, you know, I can't really, you know, without me actually observing the patient and looking at the medical records, there's no real end. But no one wants to do that, because why? Because they want to be on a podcast, because they want to talk. They want their face out there. They want this, that, you know, these days all these guys they got social media pages. They got, you know, channels and whatnot. It's just like that's what all these guys do now. And it's just like, so, I always roll my eyes a little bit when I always see them bring out some of these professionals, because they just don't have all the information. And I've been around enough doctors and I've had single injuries where I've had to see second, third, and fourth opinions. And I got different answers by every single one of them. And these are amazing, incredibly well-respected doctors, incredibly well-respected and highlighted doctors. And I got a different answer by every single one of them. Every single one of them with completely different treatment approaches. And it was for a routine injury with a routine solution. So I'm just sharing from my own personal experience, my own general, I don't want to say expertise, but my own general knowledge pool, which I would say is a little bit above the average Joe. Doesn't mean I have all the answers. Doesn't mean that I'm an absolute expert. Doesn't mean that I'm coming out here and trying to tell you the real information about, let me tell you the real truth about Bick. Like that's not the point, you know. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just, you know, encouraging people to be a little bit more open-minded and, you know, see what happens. But it's a frustrating thing to have to deal with. And just because it's frustrating doesn't mean we pretend it doesn't exist. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Denver Broncos? The moves they made this off-season. Bo Nick's second procedure on his surgically repaired right ankle, and what all this means. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider Scribing. We're building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next.